the impact of greenery goes way above and beyond what we can even imagine it. And it has impacts on the zones in our brain. So, for example, the prefrontal cortex in our brain is constantly overworked with extreme planning and really like deep thought processes to try to solve challenges in our busy lives. And this area can also be overtaxed and lead to depression and unhappiness. But you can see that when this part of the brain is exposed to nature, it cools down and other parts of the brain start to ignite. And those areas are where you can have more instances of creativity and improved memory.
In a world increasingly facing the challenges of climate change, with the Building Green podcast, we will dive deep into the intersection of architecture, design, urbanism, and environmental responsibility. I'm Ladina Schipf, your host. I've been an architect and building site manager for the past 10 years. During my studies at ETH in Switzerland, as well as in my working environment, I've had many touchpoints with sustainability, like many of you, I guess. I've also learned to question what I've been told, which is why I decided to go deeper into the topic and uncover what sustainability actually means. My mission is to highlight the transformative power of sustainable architecture, not just as a practice, but as a catalyst for broader societal change. Subscribe for more of our content and enjoy the show. I'm super excited to welcome you, Kelai. You're quite a visionary in sustainable design and a key member of Makers of Sustainable Spaces. Do you usually call it just MOS?
Yeah, we go by MOS.
Okay, so MOS in Amsterdam, and your innovative work is reshaping how we think about urban greenery and rooftop gardens. That's super interesting. So you're an architect and you're not just about beautifying cities. You are more about creating sustainable, livable spaces that contribute to the well-being of the environment, but also of the people living in the city. So could you start quickly by introducing yourself, sharing your journey into sustainable architecture? So I saw you studied in Shanghai. Did that somehow influence your position towards sustainability? And I also read about I heard in a video of yours about the pink rainwater you collected on the roofs. Can you tell us more about that?
Definitely. Well, I think it started as a kid. I was building mud dams and gutters, and I was spending summers in my grandma's rose garden. And all the meanwhile, I was constantly daydreaming about the architectural secrets that I could imagine of houses where I could only see the exterior. And I didn't really know it back then, but I think these were the early beginnings to shape my journey to merge architecture, landscape, and the built environment. So back then in the early 2000s, that blend wasn't real known in a specific career. So I started off with interior design, then I shifted to interior architecture, and then all of that brought me to Shanghai to really leap into the world of architecture. And well, now you can see really how these starting points from my childhood really fuse into what I'm now doing at MOS. And well, my time in Shanghai, I was there for 4 years. I had a great adventure. And I was there to study architecture, but I also found myself in a completely new environment, which was very different from where I grew up. So you mentioned the pink rain. Well, I was there between 2012 and 2016. And the chemistry of the precipitation in Shanghai was really under a very serious influence of local pollution sources. Sulfur dioxide, which causes acid rain, was very prevalent. And I started to realize something was wrong when I'd be riding my bike in the rain and my eyes would start tearing up. So thankfully, nowadays, reports show that the acid rain has decreased significantly in Shanghai. But I did a small experiment on a roof garden I was working on in Shanghai just to collect rainwater. And lo and behold, it was not crystal clear. So indeed, what I realized living in Shanghai is that I was there to study architecture, but I wanted more from that. So I was living in a city where to connect with nature, you had to travel far outside the city. And I'm talking 1.5 hours outside at least to be able to put your feet in the grass. And this started to hit me hard after 1 year. And thankfully, I had a urban planning internship, which was kind of interesting because I did mention I started off with interior design and interior architecture. So to move from that scale of design to urban planning, I did find myself in a whole new setting. So my first assignment was actually to design a man-made island off the coast of Tianjin. And well, let's just be honest. My project manager wasn't really happy with the first result that I proposed. So then he asked to see my portfolio. And in my portfolio, I had a student assignment of a rooftop garden at a community center, which I was proposing in Chicago. And when my project manager saw this, he said, "Oh, I have an idea. Let's go upstairs." So he took me up to the rooftop, which was the first time I had seen it at that office. And it was vast and empty and situated in a valley of concrete, steel, and pollution. And so there was a major nature deficiency in Shanghai, and also from that specific location, of course. And so this was really the kind of moment in which I set out to green cities.
So that was like the moment that shaped your career in a way. And do you know if the acid rain is dangerous for our skin or something, or just in general?
I would, I don't know all the scientific components of that, but for me, the fact that it made my eyes water, I can say it was not healthy for me.
Yeah, sure. That's shocking. And so, quick question back to what you said, why you started architecture. So, was it just like, did it come together after while you were living in Shanghai, or was it always your intention to start architecture to build greenhouses?
Well, my intention started simply with my fascination of design. I was always, even as a kid, begging my parents to help me rearrange my room in a new arrangement. And please, can we make this craft assignment? I'm going to repaint, and I have this design in mind. So this started from a very early age. And I was already interested in nature at that point. But I just think at that moment in the early 2000s, the combination of these sectors was not very well known. So I started off in interior design. Then I moved to interior architecture. I studied interior architecture in Chicago. So it was really great to live in such a big city full of great design examples. And at this point, I started to become more interested in adaptive reuse. In the United States, adaptive reuse is still a fairly up and coming market. So that was kind of where I started. And funnily enough, I bumped into the right person at the right time, which introduced me to the opportunity to move to Shanghai on a scholarship opportunity to study architecture. So it just kind of, along the way, I started to fine tune further and further this specific approach that I like to take to the built environment.
That's super inspiring for everybody that's studying architecture and doesn't really know where to go yet.
Yeah, you never know where one project or one assignment or one conversation will lead you. So it just really keeps you on your toes.
Or your portfolio.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so then you started at Moss, and I read that you're doing a research in the Moss lab. So Moss has, like, on one hand, projects, and on the other hand, you do research. You have your research lab, and you are more in the research lab. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. I did have a big role in establishing the Moss lab, but I'm also still very much involved in the green design component of our agency.
Could you explain our listeners what Moss really does? So you work on rooftop gardens, green spaces, and different kind of integrating green into building projects. Can you explain a bit, like give our listeners like an overview?
Yeah, so Moss is a green design agency, and we work with local and international clients. So we are based in Amsterdam, but we do work all around the world. And we're working to integrate greenery into the built environment. In our team, we have a group of specialists that are designers, architects, plant specialists, and project managers, and we're all working together to create beautiful and impactful green spaces. So we work with project developers, architects, and large corporations, and in doing so, we design and consult green interventions into the built environment. Next to that, we're also very interested to quantify the benefits of nature on both people and the environment. So that's why we set up the Moss Lab about 3 years ago.
Okay. And could you explain more specifically how rooftop gardens and green spaces contribute to environmental sustainability and community well-being? Because I saw that you focus on both, not only the sustainability aspect, also the community, and like what are the effects that they have, like that plants have on us people as well, not only on our spaces.
Yeah, definitely. So when we talk about the impact of well-being of nature on people, we're really looking at how our current society is the indoor generation. So we spend on average 90% of our lives indoors. So that means by the time you reach the age of 40, your indoor age is 36. And
Wow.
living indoors has a really big impact on us. So think about all the time that you spend indoors, working, sleeping, eating, socializing. And this disconnection to nature can, really create a disbalance in our health and in our happiness. So with indoor green, we're really targeting well-being and how we can deliver the connection to nature to people year round in all places of the world. And with outdoor green, it's a different approach. So, yes, we also do want to invite people to connect to nature with outdoor green. So, at Moss, outdoor green is really about rooftop gardens, vertical gardens, and urban farming. So, in these places, we can also really invite people to come outside, take a breath of fresh air, connect with the nature that we create and that we inspire to grow there. But also, there's a whole range of ecosystem services that outdoor green spaces can really harvest. So think about the stormwater that's retained, the urban heat island that can be mitigated, the host of biodiversity that we can also attract to these spaces. So, we have these sort of different ambitions with both indoor and outdoor green, but in the end, it's all about connecting people to nature and really getting people to spend time and to harvest the benefits that they can find in those places.
And can you specify what the benefits are for our bodies by connecting to nature?
Yeah, so that's really what we're busy with at Moss Lab. So Moss Lab is really looking into the world of plants and their benefits on users' well-being. And so we're looking into different topics. So far, the first research we made was about the different volumes of indoor greenery and how that can impact people and their well-being. So what we did is we set up an experiment with 3 conditions. And the first condition was a control with no indoor green. And the second condition had about 0.5% of that entire room as green. So think in a standard office, 2 to 3 plants in the corner. That's about 0.5% of the volume in green. And then the third condition is more what Moss goes for. It's 8% green volume in that room. And that's really our sort of benchmark for what we start with in our projects. So in this research, there were various steps which were carried out. So for 30-minute periods, 33 participants came 3 different times. And during each time, the heart rate was monitored throughout the experiment. So we actually invited the participants to do a Fitbit study. They had no idea every time they came, there was a different volume of greenery in their setting. And then during that time, they were asked to fill out Sudoku puzzles, and they also had some time pressure to sort of emulate the stress factors. And in the end, what we were doing is we were looking at the data from the Fitbit, we were looking at the results of their Sudoku puzzles, and we were also at the very end of the experiment asking them some qualitative questions as well about their experience. And so what we saw in the end was that the heart rate and therefore the stress levels were significantly reduced in the scenario with the 8% green, as opposed to the 0.5 or the 0% green. So this really shows us that users feel better and perform better in spaces where there's more green.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, that was the first research we did. And this was done with master's students at the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. We've really had a lot of fun teaming up with their students and young scientists to carry out this study. And then we didn't stop there. The next one we did was on acoustics. And the most recent one we did was on how green spaces can attract people back into the workspace.
Do you know from a biological aspect what it does to our bodies?
Yeah, that's also a really interesting topic. So I want to tell you a little story. So, um, a lot of people will talk about greenwashing plants, and people will talk about that. Oh, if you add this one plant, you're going to improve the air quality in your space. And so this was something we're also very, we're a bit skeptical about. We do believe a lot in the power of nature, but we want to know also how many plants does it really take to get that impact. And in some projects, when plants are introduced and participants are asked the question, has the air quality improved here? Yes or no? Participants would answer, yes, it has, even though statistically, looking at the metrics of the space and the air quality in that space, the air quality has not changed. And perhaps if we were, living in airtight domes where there was no exchange of air from the outside to the inside, maybe that would be more the case. But it's very difficult to quantify such a big difference. However, if people perceive that there's an improvement in the air quality, this is already monumental. And so when people feel better, they perform better and they're happier and they're more satisfied in their situation. And so the impact of greenery goes way above and beyond what we can even imagine it. And it has impacts on the zones in our brain. So, for example, the prefrontal cortex in our brain is constantly overworked with extreme planning, if this, then that, and really like deep thought processes to try to solve challenges in our busy lives. And this area can also be overtaxed and lead to depression and unhappiness. But you can see that when this part of the brain is exposed to nature, it cools down and other parts of the brain start to ignite. And those areas are where you can have more instances of creativity and improved memory. So what we like to do is, get people just to have a visual connection, number one, with nature, where they can rest their eyes. And when you focus on nature, you don't have to think too hard about it. Instead, it's more of maybe you can slightly admire the texture of the leaves or the light patterns when the light shines through those leaves, or you can start to notice a movement of a plant. That this is not something you have to think hard about. You don't have to make any big plan about it, but it's really just admiring what's there. And that's already very beautiful in itself. And so we really try to collect these experiences where people can be inspired by nature. And so in an indoor project, we like to create a variety of situations where people can take a stroll through the nature, or they can find a quiet seat, or maybe they can have a collaborative brainstorm with their team in a very green setting of nature. And that we try to create these different instances where it's creating a lot more opportunities for people to do their normal work or do their normal day-to-day activities, but in a setting where they can reap these benefits that nature has to offer us.
You know what makes me super happy? When I come home and I see that like one of my plants has a new leaf growing. That makes me so happy.
Absolutely. And it's really beautiful to see the change of nature over time. And this actually has a lot to do with our the bodily systems of every single one of us, that we experience the seasonal changes. It's actually related to our affinity to nature, and it's important for us to experience this, the changing and over seasons, but also over time, and new leaves forming and some leaves dying away. But there's this constant change and this constant flux, which is really rewarding to actually soak in. And that way you can connect to nature in a whole nother way.
Yeah. So for people with a home office or listeners that want more green in their homes or in the office, do you have like specific plants that you think are super easy and have a lot of benefits? Like 2 or 3 types, or doesn't it really matter?
Well, selecting the best plants for any space really depends a lot on the microclimate, personal preferences, and specific goals. However, I do like to refer back to a study that NASA did in the 80s, where actually they took an airtight dome and they pumped it full of the most common toxins that you would find in our in indoor environments. So this is related to the sick building syndrome. And so this dome was pumped full of, think, formaldehyde and different types of adhesives and paints and what we can find in carpets and plastics. And then one by one, they tested the 100 most common houseplants to find which plant was combating these toxins most effectively. And well, what they found out is that all 100 plants were doing something positively in that space. And think again, this is really an airtight environment, so it's not the same as our indoor space today. But ultimately, every single plant had some positive impact, and some plants were specifically good at removing formaldehyde, or some were most effective at introducing oxygen in the nighttime as opposed to the daytime. So in the end, it's hard to narrow it down. But if you want to take what NASA found, their number one plant that they identified in terms of the plant that was able to remove the most toxins was the Sansevieria, also known as the snake plant. So this plant thrives in low light, and it's known for air purification. And this is a plant that evolved in desert areas. So it's a very hardy plant. And since it's evolved in these desert areas, what it does is it actually opens up its spores in the nighttime, where the air was a bit more cooler. And in the nighttime, that's when the photosynthesis would happen. So this plant is also very well known to have in your bedroom because it can help promote more oxygen in your space while you're sleeping. But another star from this study that NASA ran was the spatiphyllum, or the peace lily. And this plant is known to tolerate low light, and it can help to remove some of those indoor pollutants. Now, I would like to just refer back to that question about how many plants do you need to have in a space to really make an impact? And we always like to look at moss to really emulate how nature is found in its natural setting and try to bring that back into the indoors. So one of the things that we're looking for is no plant stands on its own. So we really like to create clusters and groups and families of plantings. And, I won't go into every single one of our manifestos, but that's a very important one, that no plant stands alone. So really try to think about not just putting one small plant on a shelf all by itself, but really to create a small garden also inside.
Can they be in separate pots?
Yeah, they absolutely can be in separate pots. But what we try to do is recreate how you find nature outdoors. And you never see one plant standing all on its own in nature. So yes, it's possible, but it's going to need more maintenance because it doesn't have a lot of water storage. It's going to need more tailored fertilization over the years. Actually, if you could do a cross-section through the earth and through the soil, you would see a whole network of communication in the roots and in the fungi underneath the soil. And so what's happening, which we don't see to the human eye, but these plants are helping each other out to share nutrients, to send warning messages when there's an infestation or an attack. And ultimately, plants are stronger in numbers. And when you have one plant all on its own, we cannot reach that same effect.
And are some plants like enemies to each other, or do they all work together?
Well, you really want to look at the type of species that you're working with. So you wouldn't want to put a succulent with a tropical plant, but you want to think more, again, try to think about how you find it in nature, to group those families of plants together.
A few of you might know that I recently opened my own architecture studio, and I just started with the podcast. I'm very excited to build a platform where I connect with inspiring people to learn along the way and share these learnings with you. So if any little thing has inspired you, or if you learned anything new, I'd appreciate if you could rate the show or share my content on social media, Spotify or YouTube, or wherever you listen to it. And if you think there are any touch points between you and me, I'd be super happy to connect with you. Feel free to reach out on any platform. So I saw that before working at Moss, you already worked on urban farming projects. Can you quickly, first of all, explain what urban farming is, how the urban food production works, and what kind of products or food you can produce in urban farming?
Definitely. So urban farming and building integrated agriculture are really important in the sustainable green urban environment. So urban farming is all about cultivating crops within the city limit and promoting local food production. So by doing so, we want to reduce transportation of food, so the food miles, and we also want to enhance food security. And what we thirdly want to do is connect people to how food is made. So building integrated agriculture really seeks to incorporate all these aspects and at the same time connect people to outdoor green spaces. So when we talk about urban farming, we're looking at rooftop gardens, vertical farming, green walls that transform buildings into productive and eco-friendly structures. So altogether, these edible landscapes can also mitigate the urban heat island effect, store rainwater, improve the energy consumption of a building. So just as an ornamental landscape would do, so can an edible landscape. But at the same time, these projects can also help to reap the benefits of fresh, locally produced food in a conscious urban environment.
And how can it improve the energy efficiency of a building? Because is it because it works like as a cooler of a flat roof, let's say, so it doesn't heat up that much, or how should I imagine that?
That really comes down to the vegetative layers of a building that help to insulate the building. So with any sort of roof garden or urban farm rooftop, you have a package of, number one, waterproofing, and then you have substrate. And then on top of the substrate, you have the plants, and also within all those layers, there's a water storage. So these layers help to provide an insulation to the building that really helps to cool down. And there's a wonderful project reference actually on the rooftop of the Chicago City Hall, where the City Hall is half of one entire block in Chicago. So on the City Hall roof, they implemented a roof garden, and on the neighboring building, which is not the City Hall property, they did not. And you can actually see how the temperature of the roofs is dramatically different, where you have those vegetative layers as opposed to where you just have an asphalt roof. So back to what I was saying, urban farming roofs can actually also promote the energy savings of a building with its thick layers. And even more so, urban farming roofs do require generally a thicker package of substrate for leafy greens and for vegetables and for small fruits. So we can see that there's even more benefit, for example, on an urban farming roof than there would be on a cedar roof with this thinner package.
So from a constructive aspect, is urban farming, are these just pots that you put on top of a roof, or is it integrated in the construction? And if we put pots, I guess you have to reinforce the structure, or how does that work?
Yeah, there are so many different ways to implement urban farming on a building. It could be done in pots or planters. It could be in raised beds. It could be in a more roof garden style where it's actually vegetative layers built into the roof. It can be with the greenhouse. It can be a vertical farm on a facade. There can be cold boxes. There are so many different solutions to implement urban farming.
And what do you usually grow there? Like pumpkins and tomatoes, or more mint and basil?
Well, it really depends where you are and who's eating it and how are they going to collect, or how are they going to eat that produce. So I did a extensive study on the different types of building integrated agriculture, not only on the typologies, but also on the business models. And what you really want to look at is once you can envision an urban farm on a building, where is that food going? Is it going to be offered on a menu in a Michelin star restaurant? Is it a school garden for kids to learn from? Is it the garden of an office building where employees are encouraged to take a break from work and to get their hands in the soil? So based on who's using it and who's working on it, then you can get a little bit further along to decide what you want to grow there. So I can give you an example of an urban farming roof that Moss realized at Casa 400, which is a project in Amsterdam. And here what we envisioned was a roof on the top of a hotel, which happens to have a really nice view over the city. And we also envisioned a sort of beer garden on this roof. So where hotel guests and also where urbanites from Amsterdam can also come to visit this roof, and they can find themselves on a sunny afternoon enjoying snacks and drinks that actually incorporate elements from the urban farm on the rooftop. So what we did was we worked together with the chef to tailor the list of plant species and to find a good balance of the growing season and the menu. And what you could see over time is that the chefs, as they would fulfill the cocktail and bites menu, they would come over to the rooftop farm, which was all at the same level as the beer garden. And they would harvest mint for the mojitos, and they would harvest fresh parsley for the garnish on the appetizers and so on. And this project really was a great example for combining what's on the roof with what can be used specifically on the roof. But this is one example, and there's so many different ways of doing this. So I think you have to really imagine school gardens, hotel gardens, office gardens, residential gardens, and then think back to who's going to be using it and what's most useful to them. General rule of thumb is you want to grow things that don't have a very long harvest period. So you asked about pumpkins. I would sway away from that and move more towards things like tomatoes and leafy greens and small herbs, and especially herbs which you can't find at the supermarket. So really those specialty items, which you cannot normally find. So that's also adds a whole nother attraction and possibility for the urban farm.
That's so cool. Must be such a cool experience, like sitting at the bar and the bartender gets up and grabs the mint just from the pot next to you. Super cool. And can you combine it? Because in Switzerland, we have to build solar panels on flat roofs, or on any roof, actually, on any new build. But we also have to build green roofs. So there's usually the solar panels are a bit higher to have enough space for the plants. Can you also integrate solar panels there, or doesn't it make much sense?
Absolutely. Solar panels on biosolar roofs can really, improve also the efficiency of the solar panels. So it's said that between 5 and 15% increase in solar panel efficiency is achievable when there's also the cooling effect of the greenery underneath the panels. So the shading and the temperature reduction really helps to optimize the panel's performance. And at the same time, the plants underneath the solar panels quite like the difference in the microclimate. So we can work with shade lover plants that really like to thrive underneath the solar panels. But for solar panel roofs to be feasible, it really comes down to the structure. Not only structure, but also the budget. And when you have a roof garden, you have, let's say, somewhere around 500 kilos that you need to account for every single square meter on the roof. And then the solar panels might be another, let's say, 100 or 200 kilos per square meter. Now your roof needs to hold 700 kilos, but what if your structural analysis only allows 500? So then there's some decisions that need to be made, and oftentimes one is chosen and not both. So that's really something that has to be viable in the project, is the structural capacity for the combination of these systems, and also the budget.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the budget. How much do you have like a range of how much you calculate for for a square meter of green roof versus a normal roof, or the additional cost, or in general, talk about the business viability of integrating green roofs or urban farming. I guess urban farming must be a bit more expensive even.
Yeah, so for rooftop gardens, we're really looking at the sort of attraction that you can make to get people on your building, get people to be using your building and to be visiting your building and to appreciate that space. And a lot of times the return on investment is really based on that specific aspect. And when we calculate the prices of our projects, that's something that we definitely offer in multiple stages of our design development. There's generally a range that we can offer based on the sorts of materials that we're using, what location are we even looking at? What about the transportation? Not only horizontal transportation, but also the vertical transportation. Is it easy to get on there? Do we need to use cranes? Can we just use the internal stairs or even the elevators of the project? So these are all things that really have an impact on the roof garden installation. And for example, is the roof already safe? Is it secure for people to be there? Is there already a railing? Is it accessible for all people? So those are the sort of things that can really change the price of the roof garden. And then you can think about, well, do you want it to be also accessible in the nighttime? Should we have lighting? Do you want other kind of features for people to be able to work there? So do we need also electrical outlets for people to plug in their laptops? And then what kind of materials do we want to have on the roof garden? Those are all things that really impact the budget of a project.
And how do you sell that to investors? What's their business viability?
Yeah, so we're really talking with project developers and investment managers about how people experience the space. And think about it. When given the choice between a green space and a gray space, which one do you choose?
The green. Of course, especially in summer when it's hot, or if I need like a break from work, I need something nice to walk around, to watch, and yeah.
Yeah, so when it's about outdoor, roof gardens are a major draw for people. And not only do they offer a stunning outdoor space, and it offers people the opportunity to connect with nature and enjoy fresh air, but also people value the sustainability aspects of these projects. So the demand for developments with green spaces has really changed over time. So if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, I would have to tell you, yeah, we have some really hard conversations with investors and project developers to convince them to green their buildings. And now it's totally changed. So we actually have a large range of repeat clients that come back to us and they say, you know, we greened that building and now I can rent the space of my building faster, my tenants rent longer, and they pay more per square meter because they like having green in their building. And so the value that greenery adds to properties really does attract tenants, and it fosters this sense of well-being that attract people to spend time and to spend their daily lives in these projects. And so we've actually interviewed the developers that we've worked with on a number of different projects, and we've heard their stories about how people are attracted to their spaces. And these developers are telling us they're never going to develop a building without greenery again, because it just makes so much sense to add, you know, number one, there's the upfront cost of incorporating greenery. So you have to think about the design fee, you have to think about the upfront construction, but also the ongoing maintenance. And this is very important to discuss at the upfront stages, because in reality, these projects only start from the moment in which they're realized. So up until then, if you haven't locked in a solid maintenance contract, your project is no good. So it's so important that you have a dedicated team to take care that the irrigation is in check, to take care that the fertilization has been done properly, to take care that the lights are, so if we're looking at indoor gardens, that the supplemental daylight lamps are specifically attuned to the light scenario in the space. So you constantly need someone. These are living organisms. So you constantly need someone who's there dedicated to take care of the projects. And so we can say, as a rule of thumb, the maintenance costs are equal to about 10% of the upfront costs that you pay to install a project year after year. So about 10% of that upfront cost you need to reserve in the maintenance. And so if we can get project developers to lock this in, then we have a really good opportunity to realize the sort of project that will really make a difference for that development.
Yeah, super interesting with the 10%. And what's very nice about the gardening, what we don't have that much in architecture. So in architecture, it's more you build a house, and of course it changes over time. But gardens change even more. Like 10 years from now, every plant will be bigger. Some will have to be replaced or whatever. But it's going to be a completely new world. And so you said the whole situation with investors have changed. Are you still in touch with friends of yours from Shanghai? Do you know if it's greener there now?
Yeah, I think it is. It's getting greener a little bit everywhere. And, Shanghai is also very close to Singapore, where you have perhaps the greenest city in the entire world. So Shanghai gets a lot of great inspiration. And so that's also good to see that new things are popping up all over the world. And also at Moss, we started our projects in the Netherlands. And then within a few years, we had projects in Germany and in Belgium. And shortly after, we had projects in the UK. And now we've also realized our first project in the United States in Austin, Texas. So you really see that more people around the world are really drawing themselves to that opportunity to enjoy relaxing and memorable experiences amidst greenery and also beautiful panoramas and really seeking that, connection to nature.
I mean, it makes so much sense. Our cities are so dense and like we have, I think you live in Amsterdam, right?
Correct.
Amsterdam and as well as Zurich, where I live, there are a few parks, green parks, nice parks, not like in other cities where you have like somehow a park that nobody uses. But still, the green space is limited. And I see it here when it's sunny, like everybody is outside, everybody's in nature. And it's the only places we still have are flat roofs, and we have a lot of them. So it only makes sense to...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much opportunity.
Do you guys have a goal? How many roofs you want to make green for the next 5 years or something?
Well, our goal is to connect people to nature, and that can be through design projects. It can be perhaps through this podcast. Maybe someone's inspired to listen to it on a nature walk. It can be through courses and education. It can also be through the research that we publish. There's a lot of different ways that we can connect people to nature. So I think that's ultimately our goal, is to connect people to qualitative nature. And the other thing that we really try to do is get people to connect with it. So not just to view it, but to spend time and to walk through it and to observe it and admire it, and also to think from a perspective of how to incorporate nature in their own lives.
I love it. And that's also my goal, to like just bring it closer to people, to see, to show them it's super easy to make small steps. I mean, how for those aspiring to make a difference through sustainable architecture, greenery somehow, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think one really important thing is to think about the life cycle analysis of a project, especially with the built environment. So you really have to consider this, relationship that greenery adds to the built environment, and strive for balance and, embrace the innovation and especially prioritize longevity.
Yeah, that's a nice finish. Thank you so much. I think I have learned a lot, and I think our listeners as well can implement that. It doesn't matter at which stage they are. If they are like an entrepreneur, which wants more efficient, their work is to be more efficient and wants to implement more green in their offices, or if it's a developer with a flat roof, or what are usually your clients, if I may ask?
Well, we work with a range of project developers, investment managers, but architects, and even specific companies themselves. So all sorts of ways. So Generally, we're invited into the project at an early stage where we're able to make those transformations, where we're able to look at allocating the structure, the irrigation, the electrical components for any lighting that we add, for actually also thinking about how can we transport these items into these spaces. So if we're bringing a tree in the building, how are we going to do that? So we can't, those are not things that at the last minute that can be sorted into the project. So it's really about getting on board early. So if that's with the developer, that's ideal, with the architect as well. And, a lot of our projects are also with repeat clients themselves. So if you look at our portfolio, we've got a lot of green offices, so commercial projects we've realized, hospitality, so with hotels. We've even greened a school, the Ares Hogeschool, great example of what green can do to your education. And we've even also done a hospital for people with dementia. So I love to point out this project because we turned a brick atrium into an oasis. And what we did is we actually implemented a high volume of greenery in movable modules. So these are large modules that also incorporate seating arrangements and even sort of huts for people to also sit in and feel a sense of protection. And these modules are on wheels. So based on the program of this center, the team can actually move these modules around to enhance the program of that specific event. And I have to tell you, it's based in Amsterdam, and I've actually popped in there a number of different times, and I'm absolutely so pleased to see that this project continues to constantly morph over time. And you really see how when you walked into that space before green was implemented, so few people were using it. It was just like a place you passed through and you didn't want to hang around. There wasn't much to do there. And now that there's green, there's a whole nother aspect of how this space promotes happiness and how it promotes health. And yeah, so our projects are, primarily commercial spaces, but we're also looking to see all different types of projects that we can add greenery to enhance the experience that people have there.
That's super nice, especially that you have, like, on one hand, it's something that contributes to sustainability, general well-being, health, but it's also something functional. So it must be satisfying to walk in there and see that they move around the seating areas because they really use them. That's super nice.
Absolutely.
So do you have one common myth related to greenery that you want to debunk?
Yes. So the myth I'd like to debunk is that one plant will change the whole ambiance in the space. And actually, it's more about recreating nature as you would find it in nature, and really letting nature guide you in informing decisions to really foster that sustainable ethos in your day-to-day. So it takes more than one.
I really liked that one because I just moved apartments and I was looking for plants, and I thought, okay, I'll wait until I talk to you before I buy some. Maybe I'm going to go for that spider plant, right? But I'm really going to focus on not having different separate plants, one in each room. I'll have 8% and put them all together.
Great. Sounds like a good plan. Let me know after 1 month how it feels.
Okay, I will. But I have a question. Why do I not see a plant behind you?
Well, that's a good question. But if you look out the window, I've got a beautiful view to coniferous plants. So yeah, currently I'm on a work remote trip. So it's not my personal setting right now.
Okay, so. That's the right answer. Okay, Kelai, thank you so much for everything you've taught us today. We've learned a lot. It's been a huge pleasure, and hope to hear from you soon.
Absolutely, Ladina. Thank you so much for the time. It was really wonderful talking to you.
A huge thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to the podcast to support me and so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, I'd also be so grateful if you could rate and review us. If you have any guest suggestions or any feedback, you can find me on the socials at Ladina Schöpf. Thanks.